I've used several different ways of finding out audience opinions, as I felt it's essential to gathering information from the targeted demographic in order to know whether your ideas are suitable for the customers. I used 2 questionnaires in my research. The first was a very open questionnaire, simply finding out what appeals to people when watching adverts and what they like to be told and what they like to see in advertisements. This was not targeted at a certain demographic, as I was interested in the viewers as a whole before I started to narrow down my demographic and place my product in the market. This questionnaire was helpful in advising me to include discounts and promotions, to have interesting and exciting music, and to keep the audience entertained. Whereas the second questionnaire was more targeted, and I only asked females around the age of 18 to 20. This way I could narrow down my research into who I was intending to sell the product to, as these are the most important opinions, as I'm aiming to address their needs. This questionnaire was all about names and was not particularly helpful in going ahead with my research. I was too broad and my questions were not detailed enough. I don't believe that I offered many names, and that asking the focus group to suggest names was not very successful at this point, as the knowledge of the brand wasn't successful and they didn't know what to base their names upon. However, later on in my research, I interviewed the same demographic but with a different group of girls to find out the opinions and suggestions on names. This research was much more successful. I set up a room with a large table and a whiteboard to discuss names that I had researched and brainstormed, and asked the group how they felt about each name and which they preferred. This was more successful than the questionnaire, as I gave them more detail and asked their opinions on my ideas, rather than asking them for ideas themselves. Also, the way that I took the interview on a personal level, where I could interact and discuss each name, allowed any miscommunication on any ideas to be straightened out and more clear conclusions could be made. This is how I came up with the name Phase, as it was the most popular in my focus group. When wanting to find out which music was more suitable for my product for my shortlist, I decided a good way to do so would be to play each piece of music alongside the advert as if it were the final piece. This allowed the observers to see it in practice rather than in a hypothetical sense, and gave me more confidence in picking a piece of music as a targeted demographic thought it fitted with the piece well. Not everybody I asked had the same opinion on which they preferred, but it did, however, give me a good guidelines to come up with the choice on my own. Another way I gathered information about expectations of what I was going to create was in an interview style. I asked girls what they would expect to see in a fashion advert in terms of music, mise-en-scène and plots. This was helpful in all aspects, as I completed this research at the start of my project, and it set me in the right direction in terms of finding suitable music and designing the plot to my advert. In conclusion, asking the audience and people who you intend to use the product is helpful as guidelines to anyone's design. I used this research whenever I was stuck on a decision or needed inspiration for ideas and designs. After I decided upon my demographic, they were the ones who I asked, and I could make sure that the answers were relevant to the product. Even if their opinions were different to mine, it was still helpful to see them and adapt my ideas where necessary.